Today we're going to look at the nature of nonverbal communication. So our goals are we're going to look at the nature of nonverbal communication, the functions of nonverbal communication codes, and influences on nonverbal communication. So what is the nature of nonverbal communication? One, it is communicative. It conveys meaning without words. So everything you can tell somebody without actually saying words. It is ambiguous. So it can either be intentional or unintentional. Because sometimes we make facial expressions. That would be nonverbal communication. I mentioned it's ambiguous because the same look on one person's face may mean something totally different on somebody else's face. And lastly, it is to trust nonverbals over a verbal communication. It is very difficult to lie nonverbally. Think about a little kid. When you ask a little kid, you got to go to the bathroom, and they say no, and they're doing the I got to pee dance. All their nonverbals are saying they're lying, and so we listen to the nonverbal. So what are some of the functions of nonverbal communication? One is that it reinforces the verbal message, and we do this through either repeating, complimenting, or accenting. So it can also substitute. And we often do this by using, for example, a hand signal instead of actually saying a word, like thumbs up. It can also contradict our verbal communication. So when you tell somebody to smell something and make a horrible face, but go ahead, taste this, you should believe that nonverbal because it's contradictory, again, what the verbal says. So we can also use it to manage and regulate our interactions. So you can let somebody know through your nonverbals by nodding when, yeah, I understand, keep talking. Or a confused look may tell them, no, wait, you need to back up, I haven't understood what you said. It creates immediacy. So right when we do it, the other person is aware. And so it's something that is immediate and not a delayed reaction. The last is deceiving others. And I mentioned before, it's very difficult to lie non-verbally. You have to think about it very diligently. And so it's a practiced art, but I don't necessarily know that that's one we need to succeed at. So what are some of the non-verbal communication codes? You have gestures and body movement. And within these, you have illustrators that do that. They simply illustrate whatever you're saying. So if I tell you I caught a fish this big, that's an illustrator. There are regulators. This is how we use to show that continue talking. Hold up, I don't understand what you're saying. Those are those type of nonverbals. And then we have emblems. Emblems substitute for verbal communication. So an illustrator illustrates it, but an emblem would completely be in place of speaking. So for example, if I go, it's an emblem. But if I go, call me, it's an illustrator. Then we have adapters. And adapters are things we tend to do to ourselves when we're nervous. So for some people, it could be playing with jewelry, playing with your hair. It could be picking lint. If we do it to somebody else, we typically are very, very close to that person. So you're not going to typically walk up to somebody and go, hey, you got some lint on your shirt, pick it off. So think about those type of things. Then we have affect displays. And those are the shows of emotions. So typically we see these on our face, and typical emotions are universal. So happy is happy, sad is sad. It does not matter what your cultural origin is. There are some cultures that allow to show more emotions than others, but we show the emotions the same way. But we also show emotions on our body. So, like, can you tell how somebody's emotionally feeling by the way they're walking across the room or coming towards you? That leads us to even more of the codes. We have facial expressions. Does your face say what you think it is? Because sometimes our face says what we're thinking and not what we want to say. Do you have the emotional intelligence? There's an idea of masking. This is being able to mask your emotions completely. I always think about this like when they show the people at the award shows and people who didn't win have to stand there and act all happy and proud. And Most of those people are actors, and that's why they can do that, because I don't think most humans would feel that way if they lost. Then they talk about eye behaviors. Every textbook I've ever talked about mentions eye behaviors. If we like you, our pupils will get big. You got to be really liking me if you're close enough to see how big or how small my pupils are. So I'm just saying, I think that's an already given, that if my pupils are dilated, that I like you because you're close enough to see that. Then there's also the voice. And this breaks down into the tone in which you use and the pitch that you use. Because sometimes we can say things and we think that we're saying one thing, but our voice is saying something completely different. If you yell something because you don't realize the volume at which you're speaking, that also changes the meaning of what you're saying. There's also paralanguage, which are all the little things that our voice does that is not actually words. Things like everything you can let people know without actually using a real word. That leads us to touch. Touch is haptics, and think about how you touch somebody. What does that say? Is it a comforting touch like a hug or a pat on the back? Is it praise, which is a different kind of pat on the back? Then we have the space in the environment. And those are the distances that are mentioned on the slide. So you have the intimate distance, which is really close up to 18 inches. Then you get personal, which is 18 to 4 feet. Now the rule of thumb is on personal, the more I like you, the closer I will let you get. So that also goes into personal space. So within that 18 inches to 4 feet, if I like you more, I'm going to let you get closer. Then we get the social, which is this distance. This is where we put most people. And again, as I get to know you, I'm going to let you closer. Then we have the big public space, which is 12 feet. We typically in the public space, if we are watching, for example, a performance, which is when we will lose all our personal space because we're sharing the experience, the performer generally has a barrier for their safety between the audience and the stage so that there's a time delay. We also talk about territoriality, and this is how, which is chronemics. This is how we observe time. M time and P time. We have monochronic and polychronic time, which I also talked about in intercultural. But in time cultures like the United States, we think time is something that you can earn, save, use, buy, and time is an intangible. P time cultures see it that way. So they're more lackadaisical about time. I call them the ish people. So if something starts at 10, they'll be there at 10-ish. So it might be 10:30, it might be 11. So what are some of the influences on nonverbal communication? I've mentioned cultural. Because the contact rules depend on touch or non-touch, that is going to be very different between cultures. Some cultures touching is okay, other cultures it is not. So you need to be aware of that. How we use mediated communication. In mediated nonverbal communication, as we see here, we have developed emojis in place of our nonverbal communication. And quite frankly, we needed those because things like LOL doesn't quite cover sarcasm. The little devil emoji does it a little bit better, but still you need to know the person for those intonations to come through in mediated communication. And then you have the situational context. Is it a private setting? Is it a public setting? The physical space you're in is going to change how you communicate. So if you're in closed quarters, that's going to mean you're probably going to lower your voice. You're probably going to talk softer. That's going to affect the way you communicate. And there are also the informal and formal dimensions. Is this a personal or an impersonal situation? Is this a relationship that we have? Or is this with somebody who's a perfect stranger? Because your nonverbal is going to be very different. And how you pick up on other people's nonverbals is going to vary depending on your relationship with them. So what we looked at today, we're not doing it in class, so let me get past that, sorry. What we looked at today are the nature of nonverbal communication, functions of nonverbal communication, nonverbal communication codes and influences on nonverbal communication.